Good morning, church. As I mentioned at the beginning of the liturgy, the gospel today is one of great challenge. The preacher can go in multiple directions. I've chosen to go with the last part. It is the most graphic, and it's the one that causes people to say, "Oh, wow." And oftentimes, folks usually ask questions later, did Jesus really mean that? Having said that, I'd like to begin with a short story. A man and a woman in their 80s fell in love and married. On their wedding night, they were both excited, but also a bit afraid. The woman came to the doorway of the bedroom and saw her husband standing by the bed. She said, "Honey, how do we begin this?" He said, "Oh, my love, don't worry. Everything will be fine. But I'll need a few minutes to get ready." So, having said that, he took out his glass eye and put it in a box at the side of the bed. Then he took out his teeth and placed them in the box at the side of the bed. Then he sat on the bed and unscrewed his prosthetic leg, reached up and took off his toupee. Those ended up in the box as well. Now, church, having done all of this, he climbed into bed and said, "Honey, I'm ready." Still standing in the doorway, the woman responded, "Thank you. But I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to get into the bed or the box." Church, parts of our bodies are parts of ourselves. That is what makes Jesus' words so challenging in this morning's gospel. Jesus says that there can be an advantage in plucking out our eye and cutting off a hand or a foot. Now, of course, to answer the question I asked earlier, Jesus is not, and I repeat, is not speaking literally. He is not asking us to maim our bodies. He's not asking us to indulge in self-mutilation. He is speaking figuratively. And in doing so, he is saying that there can be certain things which we need to remove from our lives. And the things which need to be removed can be very, very close to us, almost a part of us. Therefore, removing them can be difficult, perhaps as difficult as cutting off a hand or a foot. Case in point, all joking aside, this story is true. Louise had been married to Tom for 7 years. It wasn't easy. Like most couples, their marriage began romantically enough. But soon it became apparent to Louise that Tom had a drinking problem. When he came home drunk, which was more and more frequent, he began to abuse her. At first it was only verbal. But then it escalated and became physical as well. On several occasions, Louise required medical attention and found herself making up stories to disguise the real source of her bruises from the doctors. Oh, doctor, I fell down the last 2 stairs taking the laundry to the basement. I tripped over the tricycle in the driveway and hit the automobile. And the stories went on and on and on. On one occasion, church, Tom came home particularly inebriated. He flew into a violent rage and began to throw things around the home. Their 4-year-old son, who was awakened from his sleep, came into the living room at that moment. Louise saw Tom's anger flash across his eyes when he saw the child. He took 2 steps in the child's direction, but then checked himself and retreated into the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. As Louise picked up her son to console him, she could not forget the anger in Tom's eyes. Surprisingly, for the first time in her life, in that relationship, she realized that the violence which was usually directed against her could affect her son as well. That very night, after Tom had fallen asleep, Louise took her son with her in the car and drove to a woman's shelter on the west side. A very painful divorce followed, but Louise never once looked back. She never once looked back. In the months and years that followed, as she talked to counselors and friends, family members and church folk, they often asked her, why? Why, Louise? Why did you stay with Tom as long as you did? Louise would always give the same answer, folks. Before I realized that he could hurt my son, I couldn't imagine leaving Tom. Divorcing him was like rejecting a part of myself. It would have been like cutting off my hand. Sometimes, church, the things that most endanger us appear to us as normal and acceptable. Sometimes the greatest threats to our lives are the things that seem a part of our very selves. Therefore, the thought of leaving those things behind is unthinkable. It's impossible. It's difficult for us to even begin to imagine doing so. It is for this reason, church, that Jesus uses such shocking language in this morning's gospel. For this reason, he suggests that we cut off our hand or our foot or pluck out our eye. And he does this to get our attention because Jesus knows that at times there are things in our life that we need to end. We need to stop. We need to turn away from. We need to keep on keeping on in the other direction as fast as we can. Jesus knows that. And Jesus knows that at these times it is difficult. And even though it seems like we are cutting off a piece of ourselves, refusing to take that step would endanger something or someone of even greater value. Church, we might love our work. We might thrill to the excitement of accomplishing things and finding success in our job. But if the energy and time and effort that we put into our work begins to strangle our relationship with our spouse and our children, then we might need to change our job, or at least the way that we do it. That possibility might seem like eliminating a very part of ourselves, yet it would be better to do that than to continue to work full throttle and lose our family in the process. I can relate to what I just said because I am gleaning that from my own familial experience. My father, who is a recovering alcoholic, a man who loved his family but had a very peculiar way of showing it, was so much in love with his job that our family suffered greatly from both the alcohol and his preoccupation with his work. My mother gave an ultimatum, church. On the first account, she said, "It's me or the door." On the second account, it was the children or the door. And once you go out that door, because I'm not going out it, the children aren't going out it. Once you go out, there's no coming back. So you either end this now, or you end us. They are now married for 61 years, church, and that was her 25th wedding anniversary present for him. Happy anniversary, Pops. But he cut off two things. The first one, the alcohol, and the job he changed to accommodate the needs of the family. And 61 years later, they can't live with each other, and they can't live without each other. You know, there may be somebody in our life who consistently manipulates us and takes every effort to tear us down. It could be a relative, a friend, a member of the church family, perhaps even a parent. If after repeated attempts to correct that relationship, we realize this person will never change, we might have to sever ties with this person, or we will never change. We might have to sever ties with the one who continues to manipulate us and hurt us. Although that might seem like tearing out the fabric of our very lives, it would be worse to find ourselves sinking into depression or losing our mental health. We might recognize that we have an addiction to alcohol, to drugs, to gambling, to compulsive spending, to excessive overeating, to pornography on the internet. And it might become clear that if we are to remain healthy, we need to stop the addiction. To stop, however, might seem impossible because we have been enmeshed in it for so long that it is part of us. Like cutting off our hand or our foot, we need to cut off the addictive behavior. Yet, it would be worse to let that addiction control us and possibly destroy us. Church, Jesus uses such strong language in this morning's gospel because he knows that removing deadly things from our life is not easy. It's not. It is like losing a piece of ourselves. He also understands that taking such strong action is not possible by willpower alone. God's grace is necessary. And St. Paul says, God's grace is enough for me. Enough. And with that grace, I can change. I can move on. I can sever what needs to be severed. Here's where the good news emerges, church. For we believe in a God who calls us to life and happiness. Not death and destruction, but life and happiness. We believe in a God who will assist us when we need to make hard decisions and attain those things that God has promised. We might have to wait for the right moment, but we as a people believe that God will not abandon us. Hold Jesus to his word. At the end of St. Matthew's Gospel, what does Jesus say on the Mount of the Ascension? He says to the disciples, "And know this, that I am with you always, always, until the end of time." And I like to translate that another way, church, always and in all ways. He is with us, seeing us through, never abandoning us. Now, we might have to wait for the right moment. But we as a people believe that God will not abandon us. We believe that God will be there to give us the strength we need to keep on keeping on and to move forward in life. My mother and Louise found that right moment, and they both seized it to save themselves and their families. We need to believe that God is with us and will give us what we need to control our overwork, to protect ourselves from manipulation, and to say no to that next drink, that next click on the computer, or that next call in to buy something we do not need. These threats might seem so much a part of us that removing them might feel like cutting off a limb, church, or plucking out an eye. But with God's help, it can be done. Amen? It can be done. For with God, all things are indeed possible. You know, church, the time's going to come when we will end up in a box. Not with a glass eye, not with false teeth, and not with a prosthetic leg. We will end up in a box. But that has to be in the Lord's time. Not in a time that might come all too prematurely because we didn't have the courage to cut off those things that needed to be cut off and cut out of our lives. How often have we heard folks say, if she only would have said something, if he only had asked for help, they wouldn't be where they are right now. Where they are right now, I don't believe is always God's time. We will end up in the box, but let it be in God's time, church. And in the meantime, let us keep on keeping on and getting rid of those behaviors that need to be eradicated from our lives. Amen? Amen. God bless you in all your attempts. May the grace of God